Liberalism entered the lexicon properly around the turn of the 19th century. Prior to this, to be liberal was generally meant as akin to being properly or adequately generous, a virtue. This transition was, it seems, in describing the nature of government, in extending freedoms to the people. Generosity by rulers in extending freedoms to the people was seen as liberal. Liberalism, then, is not an ideology or worldview. Rather, liberalism is simply a demand for more freedom. As such, liberalism may represent a fix in repressive times and under repressive regimes towards a good amount of freedom, more generosity from the rulers. However, liberalism inevitably overreaches. From its roots in Latin liberalis, meaning generous or noble, liberalism shifted in the late 18th century to a popular political call for more self-rule and less monarchy. But, as a relative term without first principles, liberalism always demands more, lacking brakes against excess. History proves this. In early America, liberalism supplanted the far better term Republicanism, the founders' term for tempered freedom and ordered liberty under law and virtue. Republicanism disrupted democracy's factional spoils by prohibiting excess through enumerated powers and rights. Yet liberalism's inherent and insatiable more freedom enabled the dialectical ratchet, a process of iterated small compromises moving in one direction over time, where each more freedom demand erodes constraints without reversal, leading to excess. Progressive taxation robs the few to redistribute to the many. Sexual liberation means the abandonment of family bonds. Even the refusal to return the shopping cart to the stall represents a tiny revolution of more freedom for the one at the expense of the many. Democracy's excesses tie directly to liberalism. Democracy as majority of allied factions battling for spoils. Ancient Athens' demos as localized identity groups per Aristotle, lending toward tyranny. Liberalism is that unending more, enabling that class warfare as inherent rights are lost in the fog. Liberalism, applied to America's constitutional republic, overturned order in favor of anarchy. Industrial-scale abortion libertinism denies the very nature of inalienable rights. Student loan forgiveness liberates the one as it chains the many. While liberalism might be symbiotic with despotism, reducing repression, it parasitizes virtuous systems like early America's covenant community, demanding absolute autonomy, liberation from duties, and excessive rights that necessarily deprive others of their rights. Even classical liberalism, as it claims a sort of time capsule quality never demanding excess, and stuck in the Enlightenment period ideologically, confuses the Christian metaphysical foundations with claims as being its own, and in so doing it parasitizes the very foundations of its own demands for Goldilocks liberty, not too little, not too much. Classical liberalism doesn't magically come with its own presuppositional basis, and it cannot magically shed the internal logic of its own claimed title, more freedom. An ideology in motion tends to stay in motion. This is where the supplanting of liberalism for republicanism becomes so important to the story, and so utterly damning. The founders knew that there would be calls for ever greater freedoms, and they also knew that there was an amount of personal freedom that, if exceeded, would represent a reduction in goodness and in godliness, as the freedom of the one would transgress the many. This excess is again built in, as the only internal logic of liberalism is more. It is a necessarily slippery slope to the worship of the one and radical rejection of the many. It is, in this manner, Luciferian. The proper term, then, for that which the classical liberals often claim they desire, which is to say a correct amount of freedom tempered by the reality of duties and obligations, is republicanism. In fact, republicanism is what most really think of when they think classical liberalism. For instance, classical liberalism's supposed emphasis on limited government, individual rights under law, and free markets usurped them from the founders' republicanism. Examples abound. Locke's proposed natural rights, life, liberty, property, influenced republican constitutions, not unbridled liberalism or democracy. Smith's invisible hand in free markets assumed republican civic duty, not an attitude of screw the other guy, I'll get mine. Classical liberals often cite these, but the term liberalism obscures how republicanism's balanced one and the many prevents the parasitic destruction of the host inherent in liberalism's relentless more. Reject liberalism's relativism and demands for liberty for some that crushes the liberty of others. Reclaim republicanism as the preferred term for tempered freedoms and ordered liberty. The truth demands action. reclaim our nation.